Welcome to the Story Lab. Today, it is time for us to come up with a Minecraft movie. Of course, there has recently been a Minecraft movie officially made. Well, we want to make a different, more family-friendly Minecraft movie, so let's dive right into it. There are only a few themes of Minecraft that we have to keep in mind. Creativity, exploration and survival, using resources effectively. Everyone can do it, but only the best excel. Great dreams, scaled-back realities. Mines. And with that we can already move on to the ingredients, where we will also put down our requirements for the more family-friendly movie. Playing with the themes of Minecraft. A movie about creativity. A movie playing out entirely in the Minecraft world, thus also a fully animated movie. A family movie, i.e. not only interesting for kids but also enjoyable to parents. Easter eggs are allowed, but not major plot contrivances just to make them happen. The story structure of the hero's journey. A standalone movie. Let's put all those ingredients together and let it cook for a moment. The lab will give us the results momentarily. Here we go. A different Minecraft movie. Our main character is, of course, Steve. Steve is a young man, living in a Minecraft village among Minecraft villagers. His parents are villagers, his neighbors are villagers, the merchants are villagers, etc. They hardly ever do anything, just standing around with their arms crossed and occasionally holding something. They also talk very slowly. Steve is quite different. He talks constantly, mostly to himself, and runs around the village, rearranging stuff, running through fields and even riding a pig. One day, he sees something weird moving in the trees outside the village. He tries to rally the village to go have a look at it, but no one listens to him. And so, Steve gives up on his fellow villagers and decides to go out into the world all alone, chasing after the weird thing he had seen. At first, his search goes well. He keeps getting glimpses of the creature and follows it around the world. But soon, Steve realizes that he is not doing very well. He hardly has any energy left, and when he thought about it, he realized that he had no clue where he was. He was lost in the wilderness. When the creature also disappears, somewhere at the bottom of a large mountain, Steve is at the end of his powers. After sitting around for a bit and feeling sorry for himself, Steve decides to build a shelter for the night. However, he finds that he has nothing with him, and this time there seems to be nothing nearby that he could deconstruct. Steve decides to start simple and build a little house. For that he would need a few blocks of stone and a few blocks of wood. With this goal in mind, he walks up to the side of the mountain and punches it. The stone is not impressed, and Steve's hand is hurting. Suddenly feeling quite uneasy about his prospects, Steve instead tries his luck with a tree. The tree at least reacts to Steve's efforts, and by nightfall, it has been felled, and Steve is collecting wood from it. All he can build that night is a primitive roof that he hangs between two other trees. Naturally, with this hardly comfortable arrangement, Steve cannot sleep. He lies awake all night, hearing strange sounds that any player of Minecraft would recognize immediately as zombie sounds. Luckily, Steve is not attacked that night and can spend some time the next day to construct a makeshift axe and chop down more trees. Towards the afternoon, he starts working his axe on the stone again, picking out a couple of blocks, which he then uses to build a perimeter around his wooden frame house. We see a little montage of Steve continuing to work like this for a day or two, until he had finished his hut and was now out on the hunt for some sheep to build himself a bed. Nightfall surprises Steve, as he is hunting for sheep, but he decides to continue, since he thinks he knows where some of them are nearby. But instead of running into sheep, Steve runs into zombies, multiple of them. Just about managing to kill a couple of them using his wood sword, Steve runs like hell, as soon as skeleton zombies start to show up. It seems he finally understands now what it means to be in the open world. For the next few days Steve builds traps of various complexities. He does finally manage to make a bed too. After another night of uneasy waking because of zombies walking around, Steve is trying to plant some food, like he had seen the farmers doing it at his home village. But he finds that he does not have the right tools for this job. And soon, night falls again, and the zombies return. This time, there is a weird zombie among them, a creeper. Steve hits it with an arrow, but the creeper just explodes, taking part of Steve's house with it and knocking Steve himself out for the rest of the night. Steve is found the next morning by another Minecraft human that introduces himself simply as the Master. Helping Steve to get back up to his feet, the Master asks what Steve is trying to do here. Steve explains the whole story, and the Master starts giving him tips, introducing him to things like the crafting table, oven, and mining equipment in general. Then the two of them descend for the first time into the mines, finding and mining some minerals. Steve asks the Master to teach him all that he knows, and the Master happily agrees. We thus get a large middle part of the movie, where the Master teaches Steve all kinds of things in a montage. We can see visually, by the armor that Steve wears, how he is progressing in the Minecraft world. Finally, Steve has learned a great many skills and moves away from his teacher to explore the world more on his own. The Master says goodbye with a knowing smile and the words, "If you ever need me again, you know where to find me." Then, Steve leaves the impressive fully built representation of Neuschwanstein Castle behind, wherein the Master lived. Steve now continues his journey. Zombies are no problem for him anymore, and he can build a shelter within minutes, so he concentrates on a compass and map, trying to explore the entire world. He stops at a few particularly impressive spots, but always moves on. In the end, he returns to his first hut, the one at the foot of the large mountain. There, he decides to stay and build a new home. It follows another montage of Steve building something akin to a giant palace out of gold and diamond, and automating it with redstone doors, etc. And the higher he builds his new home, the deeper and deeper does he dig into the mountain, building a huge mine system. We get a glimpse at his daily life, as he decides to build something new, calculates what resources he needs. He is still constantly talking to himself, and then heads down into the mines to find those things. On this particular day, he opens a new mine shaft into a cave when he suddenly sees a weird movement. We recognize it immediately. This is the same thing that got Steve to leave his village in the first place. Carefully, Steve follows it down deeper into the cave, where the creature is finally revealed. It is a giant ender dragon. Steve asks himself loudly how an ender dragon could have ended up in the overworld, and immediately regrets it when his voice wakes up the sleeping dragon. Running like hell, Steve just about manages to get back into his mine system before the dragon gets him, but he knows the danger is great. He quickly runs to the surface and prepares elaborate defenses. The dragon breaks out of the mountain and is immediately attacked by Steve's contraptions. But the weapons do very little to slow down the dragon, who destroys Steve's house and then angrily flies away. An exhausted Steve takes out his map to see where the dragon is heading. He is shocked to recognize something right in the dragon's path, his old village. Running towards the village, Steve starts shouting to the villagers what they should do to help him build up some defenses. But the villagers only look at him confused. Then, the dragon attacks and destroys a number of buildings. Steve tries to fight him off with his sword, but fails and then has to shift his focus to desperately try and save his inactive parents. As the dragon turns away and Steve has time to muster the destruction, he is quite discouraged, which grows into anger when the villagers just stand around doing nothing, instead of trying to rescue or rebuild. Senselessly, he starts shouting at the villagers and then runs off into the woods, shouting madly until he falls over and lands in a river. Then, he can finally cool down a bit. Knowing not what else to do, Steve travels back to the Master's home and asks him for help. Patiently, the Master leads Steve to the conclusion that he must take everyone as they were. Steve tries to take this advice to heart and calmly returns to the village. The villagers are still confused and largely inactive, only some are carrying a few cubes. Steve begins to direct them. Never asking more than that they pick up a few blocks and bring them somewhere, Steve gets the villagers to build a wall around the village and make it higher and higher and higher. As Steve had suspected, the dragon soon returned, but this time, finds no way into the village. Even when he tries to fly high enough to peek over the walls, he can hardly see the village, so high up is he. But on the edge of the wall, Steve waits for the dragon and stabs him with his sword. Then Steve calls down to the villagers on the ground. The villagers go towards a door, standing in the middle of the village with apparently no function. They open it, and the whole wall comes crashing down. The dragon is buried beneath it, while Steve jumps off at the last second before the debris hits the ground. Everyone cheers and the master mysteriously shows up in the middle of the party, telling Steve that he was proud of him. Let's summarize the story. Steve is ambitious and does not want a life with his boring villager family anymore. He disappears into the woods, where he has to learn that surviving there isn't as easy as he thought. From a master he learns the ways of Minecraft and becomes a master himself. However, he digs too deep and wakes a monster. Steve is frustrated when his fellow villagers show no initiative and wants to run away. But instead of abandoning the village, he returns a better man and helps them save them all together. What do you think? Would that have been a better movie than the one we got? Please note that everything presented here is simply the results of an experiment. No part of this presentation is intended as a correction of an existing story or claims to be the real story. The selection or omission of any parts of the source material is not to be understood as commentary, positive or negative, on the original productions. These are simply thoughts and experiments based on existing material, and none of it could be created without the work of all those involved in creating the original works. As with any scientific result, you may utilize any of the story ideas that resulted from these experiments for your own experiments or production, while citing this experiment as its source. It is now closing time for our lab. Goodbye until next time.